Good morning, Alexis.
Morning.
Our usual co-host, Matt K. Lewis, not available this week, despite it being one of the most important weeks of the election calendar. He has, as you may have heard on our little show, he has a book out called Too Dumb to Fail. He's a bit busy promoting it around the country. We expect him back soon, but we have a super duper special guest, a return appearance from National Review campaign reporter Alexis Levinson, live for me from Iowa. Thanks for coming back on the show.
Great to be here.
So you have been in Iowa for how long?
It will be 3 weeks when I leave Tuesday morning. So what are we at? 2.5 weeks, I want to say.
Something like that.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
And you when you were on the show before, you mentioned the National Review is a conservative outlet. It is editorialized against Donald Trump, but you are a straight reporter. You are not coming at this with any kind of angle or ideology whatsoever.
That's exactly right.
Now we're taping on Friday morning. It is less than 12 hours since the debate ended and the Trump event ended. Where were you last night?
Well, interesting story. I was outside the Trump rally. As you said, National Review, the editorial side, put out a very scathing issue of Trump. And Trump has a tendency of not refusing to credential media that has been mean to him. He tends to hold reporters accountable for editorial boards, which is not really standard. So I was not given a credential. When I tried to go in as credentialed press, I was told that it was so full and, they couldn't let me in because I didn't have a credential, though I, obviously gone through all the hoops to get a credential. They were letting people who did have credentials in, so it clearly wasn't that full. I waited in line for 2.5 hours to get in with kind of the normal people who are not covering this as press, and about 100 people before I got in, they cut it off and said the room was full. So I watched this from the TV, but I did stand outside and for a long time and, hung out with the crowd.
So
it was a night.
What is that crowd like? I recently speculated after listening to the Huffington Post Candidate Confessional podcast, which its inaugural episode was Howard Dean, and Howard Dean talked about how he knew he was losing Iowa 3 weeks before because he was going from event to event to event, and it would be the same people all the time. It was just his fans following him around. Did you have the sense that these are Trump fans who are just, groupies, or are there actual undecided voters here who are trying to check things out?
It was a little mix of both. There was a couple in front of me who I heard them saying they're technically Democrats. They drove in to see him, just kind of wanted to see what it's about. There was a couple behind me that they were undecided, but they wanted to try and see them all. They tried to go to another rally of his, and it had been overflowed, and they didn't get in. And then there were a lot of students. This was on the campus of Drake University, and it's school's in session, and there were a lot of people around me who were clearly student age, who were sitting there saying, do we really want to stay out in the cold for this long? I really want to see him. Do we really want to stand out in the cold for this long? What if we don't get in? And a lot of them sort of decamped by the end of it.
But is it really want to see him because it's a show, it's entertainment, or it's because I'm a Trump supporter?
So for the people around me, at least, in my many hours in line, were, for the most part, students who sounded like they really just wanted to see him because they wanted to see the show. There was one woman behind me who was absolutely devastated when, after 2 hours, her friend finally said, I can no longer feel my feet, and I really have to leave, and I can't stand in line any longer. She was a Trump supporter. She had her button, she had her hat, she had her t-shirt, she was really excited about it, and she just looked heartbroken to be walking away. But, college campus events tend to be a weird mix because you get everyone in proximity, and proximity is a lot of college kids who may or may not be able to caucus, may or may not be registered in Iowa. And, Donald Trump, that would have been a pretty good event when I were in college. I might have waited in line to go see that,
Now, I scanned the front pages of the Iowa newspapers on the Newseum website because I was curious how much play the debate was getting and how much play the Trump event was getting. And that's obviously a crude metric. And yes, I know people don't read newspapers anymore. But older people do, and older people caucus in Iowa. And there wasn't zero Trump coverage, but there definitely was more debate coverage. The photos of the debate were big. Maybe Trump was in the headline, maybe not, but the story was about the debate far more than the Trump event. Do you have a sense there of which is getting the most attention in the morning?
I think the debate is, and I actually think that's what Trump was going for. Trump is, we're watching their 3 days left now. Am I doing the math right? Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Yeah, 3 days left before the caucuses, and Trump is he's been locked in this battle with Ted Cruz for first in the polls, and that's something that people generally seem to feel is an accurate read on the situation. And now all of a sudden Marco Rubio, you saw in the last two polls, he's been stuck around 14% since November. And kind of hard to figure out. There's a lot of theories about whether that's, the Jeb ads or what, but he's been stuck. He all of a sudden these past two polls has jumped up to 16%, 18%. There's a sense that he's starting to get some momentum. And so we're hurtling towards this collision course between these three guys in the final 3 days. And Trump, I think, from what I have seen of both events, that was the best decision he made. He may have not gotten a lot of press. He may have, kind of not been the center of attention for a second, but he watched the other ones just beat the crap out of each other, and he wasn't there. He just stayed out of it, and that's his best call. If Cruz and Rubio just go after each other and tear each other down, Trump kind of potentially walks to the caucus win, and if Trump wins Iowa, this could be it. Like, we could be looking at Republican nominee Donald Trump.
Now, do you have any sense that your average undecided Iowa voter, who may not have been paying attention for most of this race, maybe this was the first debate that person was even tuning into to help make that person's final decision, and then Trump doesn't even show up? I mean, is there any downside risks there that person's saying, you didn't even have the decency, I'm just tuning in, this is what I was going to use to make my decision, and you don't have enough respect for me to be part of that?
So as I said, I was outside in the cold at the Trump event or watching it on TV for the most part. But, from what I do gather about the debate and from what I did see, it didn't sound like any of the other candidates necessarily, had breakout moments. And it sounds like they all kind of got bloodied. So maybe you come away from that thinking, God, these guys look like putzes. Like, let's all go vote for Trump. He wasn't there. He did something else. I don't know. I do think you're right that it's the final 3 days, that this is potentially the first debate that a lot of Iowa voters have turned into. There was a Jeb Bush event a couple days ago downtown where a woman asked this question. She's like, I saw in one of the debates that you said X, Y, Z. And Bush says, okay, well, narrow that down for me. Which of the debates? She's like, well, it was the one I watched. And he sort of looks at me, he's like, well, that again doesn't narrow it down for me too much, but hard to say. And so, yeah, this is when you're starting to see a lot of people tune in. They haven't seen the candidates. Their home state has turned into a circus all of a sudden. They can't turn on the TV without seeing all these ads. You may not want to make a decision, but you're going to be forced into it. you're not going to be able to escape it for the next 3 days.
Now, I saw the whole debate. Quite frankly, it was my favorite debate. And I fully agree that, I think Cruz and Rubio had terrible nights. The Rubio people are touting the Frank Luntz focus group that showed everybody loving him, but I am not a fan of Frank Luntz focus groups. I have no confidence that these are unbiased, methodologically sound affairs. But they're spending it that much. But I saw. I mean, for one thing, the Fox News moderators, and I wrote about this back in May, that Brett Baer and Chris Wallace and Megyn Kelly are like a murderer's row, and they trip up Republicans all the time, and you can't go into that kind of environment and expect to be treated kindly. But I was particularly surprised that they ran video montages chronicling the immigration flip-flops of Rubio and Cruz, which they did not do they didn't do anything comparative for the other people. I mean, it was like they're out to get Cruz and Rubio, which you can turn to your advantage if you're on your game, but neither one of them did. I thought they got beat up really badly on those points. Cruz, before that point, Cruz, I thought, made an unforced error when he, apropos of nothing, whined about getting all these tough questions and then half seriously threatened to walk out of the debate a la Trump and got roundly booed. I just thought that was just transparently jerky. And as you may know, I've been on the Jeb Bush bandwagon for a very long time, despite all evidence to the contrary. And I thought Jeb ate Rubio's lunch at immigration. In fact, I saw a Cruz operative on Twitter say Jeb cleaned Rubio's clock at immigration. So not that it means Jeb's going to win Iowa. I don't think that's going to be the case. But at minimum, I said this on Twitter, I don't see anybody breaking 30%. If no one at the debate had a breakout moment, Cruz I could still see win Iowa because he has all the evangelicals behind him and has a better turnout operation. But if he doesn't have a big win and Trump doesn't have a big momentum boost because he doesn't have ground game, I want to ask you about that. And Rubio, maybe he does third, but it's not a fantastic third because he didn't have his breakout moment and it's just a big muddle. Then that makes it easier for a Jeb or even a Christie or a Kasich to have their stand in New Hampshire. It doesn't get overly winnowed down. Right? That was my sense of the debate. But I don't know, are you hearing, I know you didn't get to see it, but is there chatter you have picked up in Iowa what other people's reactions to the debate were?
Well, so the thing you brought up about no one's going to break 30%, that's something that Republican operatives out here have been saying for a long time, for months now, that, looking at this, they're looking at it pretty weirdly, that they think Trump probably hits a ceiling at 30%. You have Ben Carson, who, even though he's totally faded out of view, will take his, this number has slowly dropped, over the past few months as Carson's polls have dropped, but, he'll take his 5% for sure. Cruz will definitely take his 25%. People are sort of starting to game this out and divide up the pie. And I don't think anyone does break 30%, but Trump does seem capable of at least hitting that mark. And if he does, that could be plenty to win. Because, you have Mitt Romney took, I want to say it was 26% of the vote.
Something like that.
6% of caucus goers in 2012. And people sort of assume that gets divided up between Jeb, Christie, maybe Kasich gets a couple percentage points for like the 2 days he's shown up here this cycle. Rubio gets some of that. Maybe Carly Fiorina gets some of that. Like there's a small slice of the pie going around to a lot of people. So yeah, I do think this is probably the first debate a lot of Iowans saw. And I don't think they necessarily came out, maybe they didn't come out decided, but maybe they came out saying, oh, now I know more. On the debate montages, those did sound really aggressive. I do tend to get a little indignant as far as this is the press's job. And if you spend a lot of time on the campaign trail, voters ask way harder questions than reporters do. And reporters have the benefit of at least, having, for the most part, having done their homework and being able to say, let me show you exactly what you did say and let me specifically say this is what I want to know about. I've watched candidates with reporters in tow have to dodge, everything from the craziest of the crazy of, why does President Obama speak on a backdrop that has Muslim symbols all over it, to, just basic, we heard this thing in an ad that you worked against immigration reform or whatever, and we don't like that. I think it's the press's job to vet them, and as you said, voters are just tuning in, and so I think it's even more important now because immigration has been a huge topic this cycle. It's a huge topic in all the ads that are running, and it, definitely a gut punch from Fox, but at the very least, you're getting the full.
Well, and you need to prove that you can handle it.
These are the stories across the year, yeah.
This is what's out there, and this is your chance to address it. Either you can or you can't. I've had this argument with Matt before. Right. The conservatives were mad that rounding out these contraception questions. Well, the problem was not the question. The problem was your answer. You got to answer it.
Right. That's been my problem with the debates the whole time, is just that this idea that, like, oh, we must have moderators who are very nice to our candidates. Like, well, but no, if you want moderators who are very nice to your candidates, go let your candidates give some speeches on TV. That's what you're asking for. If you want actually to have a debate, then you're going to have some moderators who kind of mix it up.
I mean, my only quibble would be
the subject for another time.
I thought they leaned in harder on Cruz and Rubio than the others. They didn't have sort of a similar tough shot for all of them. But again, but a tough shot's an opportunity. I mean, you can prove that you can knock it down.
Yeah.
But are you hearing people say that? Are they echoing the Luntz focus group? Well, Rubio got a tough shot, but he was poised and he stood his ground. Are people saying, wow, that was Jeb Bush's best debate, maybe he's back in this thing? Or are people saying, well, Trump's the big winner because he avoided this whole scrub? Is there any kind of consensus scuttlebutt out there?
I don't think so. I saw a lot of complimentary stuff for Jeb Bush, which coming out of a debate feels like, that's a very good thing for him. Jeb Bush, and they say it outright, he's never going to win a debate. This is not his thing. And that's become abundantly clear over the years. So if he's doing well, that's a good thing because his poll numbers are starting to go up in New Hampshire. They're feeling really good about it. I talked to him yesterday. He said just anecdotally, he feels like there's been a shift on the ground.
You talked to Jeb yesterday.
I did talk to Jeb yesterday.
Yesterday afternoon. Give me some Jeb stuff.
Oh, well, I mean, I watched him eat lunch with his wife and his son. But then, we spent a little five minutes chatting, and Jeb does not do process questions. So he doesn't like to talk about how things are going. He just says, I'm just going to get out there and make my argument. But, what he said was, yeah, we feel really good about New Hampshire. We think we've got a really good organization out there. And this is my pet peeve about candidates. I don't like when candidates say, I don't know if my campaign is polling. If your campaign is polling. You are your campaign. You may not, have the hands-on poll numbers, right in front of you, and you may not want to talk about it, but telling me you don't know that your campaign is polling is always going to kind of make me a little, really? But what he said was, my life is basically based on, the anecdotal evidence of being on the road, and what I can say is that in New Hampshire, we've started having kind of the routine of people come to my events, they talk to me, and they come up to me after, and they say, I walked in undecided, and now I'm a Jeb voter. Obviously, he is biased in this, but this is what he's saying. And, you see that in the public polling, and I've heard that from other sources who are kind of plugged into this, that Jeb feels like he's kind of on the move out there. So if Jeb, maybe the last 10 days, some New Hampshire voters tuned into this debate, that's a good thing for Jeb. If anyone thinks he won, that's a very good thing.
Now, Jeb has been almost solely in New Hampshire in all of January, almost no time in Iowa. He's in Iowa now.
And he will spend caucus night in New Hampshire.
Right. So has he just totally written off Iowa? To him, does it not even matter if he comes in seventh place because it's all New Hampshire, or does he have some semblance of an Iowa strategy?
Two things. One, yes, he has a very good team in Iowa, and what they have been saying for months is we have the best. We're not going to win the Iowa caucuses, but we have the best ground game of anyone. We have the most, we have the data operation. We may not win, but if we say we're going to turn out these 10,000 voters, those 10,000 voters, come hell or high water, will be at the caucuses. They have an experienced team. They know how to do it. They know the mechanics well. The candidate has done them no favors in Iowa, but the mechanics are solid. We'll see quite how true that is on caucus night, but that my sense is that this is kind of the Jeb Bush story, that the candidate has faltered, but organizationally, there's a lot of institutional experience in that campaign, and I think when they say the mechanics are solid, the mechanics are probably really solid. The second thing with that is there is this kind of alternate second-tier primary going on right now for who's going to use Iowa, who's going to be the surprise and springboard into New Hampshire. And those may be two separate things, but in New Hampshire, the top four or top five that we're looking at are different than the top few that we're looking at here. In Iowa, it is Cruz, Trump, Rubio, and those are the guys. And then there's, everyone else is like a solid 10 points behind or something like that. In New Hampshire, Trump still is at the top, but there's this cluster of Kasich, Christie, Jeb, and Rubio who are really trying to break out into that second place spot. And so there's a lot of kind of moving around in Iowa in the hopes that one of them can come out of it and say, look, hey guys, I just, killed everyone else in my lane in the Iowa caucus. You want me as the nominee in New Hampshire. If I can do that in Iowa, which is not a friendly electorate to this type, theoretically on a caucus night at least, not a friendly electorate to the moderate, less religious voter or less religious candidate, but look, I did well there, and now New Hampshire, these are my people, bring it on. And so Jeb is competing in that lane. Jeb and Christie have been pretty open about, we got to beat one another. Unclear, where that will fall. Neither of them have spent a lot of time here. Rubio, no one really seems to think they're getting close to, but if Jeb or Christie or some of them can really kind of take enough of his votes away that he looks like he did badly, that also does them favors. They may not be able to stop Rubio from being the strong third place that springboards into New Hampshire, but if they can pull his numbers down, they can make it look like he underperformed.
Because there's all this question: why is Bush's sewer peg Right to Rise so mean to Rubio? Bush is dead in the water. Rubio's the best shot for stopping Trump or Cruz. It seems like Right to Rise just wants to, if it can't be Jeb, we're just going to take everybody down, and there's no logic to it. It's just out of spite. But what you're saying is, sorry, go on.
Well, I mean, I actually asked him about this yesterday, and he's like, "This is politics," and it is. Yeah, in a grandiose world where, we're all trying to be the most responsible and do things for the good of the world and completely without self-interest, maybe there's an argument to be made that everyone should have been going after Trump or something. I don't know. But this is politics. These guys are running for president. There's a huge amount of ego involved there, and they wouldn't be doing it if they didn't think they could be president. And so, yeah, of course he's attacking Rubio. He has to get rid of Rubio, or he can't be president. I don't think we should be making. I always find the arguments of, shouldn't you be doing something for the good of the party? Well, no, you're running for president. You're going to do something for the good of your campaign. That seems pretty logical to me.
And so what you're saying is, the Jeb hope is by attacking Rubio, they don't even necessarily think they're going to beat Rubio in Iowa, but if they can make Rubio a weak third instead of a strong third, that makes it easier for Jeb to make his stand in New Hampshire, whereas if Rubio was a clear-cut third, there might be a move to consolidate around him in advance of New Hampshire. Right.
And, I mean, Jeb needs to keep Rubio's numbers down, period. And Jeb just needs Rubio gone. Rubio is a problem for Jeb. He's, he would also like Christie to be gone. He would also, I'm sure, like Kasich to be gone. But Rubio is the biggest problem because Rubio is the one who can compete. Christie and Kasich don't have, for the most part, operations beyond New Hampshire. They have a little bit, we're going to see if either of them make it out of New Hampshire. We're going to see, whether that's been overhyped, whether they really can kind of scrounge and get something going. But they have been living in New Hampshire. I mean, Christie almost, you saw this whole dust up with Christie. Almost didn't go home when his state was having this snowstorm, like apocalyptic snowstorm, which I missed, but gather was terrible. And so that, they don't have a lot going for them beyond there. Rubio has the infrastructure, the money to really compete with Jeb if it keeps going, beyond, if the two of them are still there beyond New Hampshire. And so the earlier that Jeb World gets rid of Rubio, the better shape that Jeb is in.
Well, let me ask you some more ground game questions. I'm fascinated by this. It's hard to get your arms around what Iowa ground game is like from reading. There's some news articles about it, but it's hard to really know.
Try to get your arms around it right here.
Right. The big question, I think, is Trump for real? Obviously, he's winning the national polling. He's winning New Hampshire polling. He is now ahead in the most recent Iowa polls after Cruz being up for most of January. I am super skeptical. I feel like this is all just reaction of media hype. Polls can be very sensitive to media coverage. They don't really tell you firm support, and they certainly don't tell you anything about your ability to get out that vote on a caucus night, which is a more involved endeavor than just going to the polls. The Republican caucus is not as involved as a Democratic caucus. They're not Democrats. You got to stand in a gymnasium and you stand in your corner and you see if your candidate's viable, and then you got a horse trade. The Republicans don't have that, but it's still going to a meeting. It's hearing some speeches. It's not just voting and leaving. I think it's about a 2-hour process end to end. So and the Trump people are known to be more independents, not regular caucus goers. You need some kind of apparatus to get those guys to show up on a cold winter night. I saw a piece from the Times from Chip Gabriel in mid-January saying this thing looks like amateur hour. He was on NPR yesterday saying, "Hey, it looks better than it did 2 weeks ago." We didn't go into a lot of detail about that. What's your sense? Is there a real Trump get out the vote effort going on right now?
So when I talked to people out here, I called around about the Trip Gabriel piece. He had a couple of them. I had a bunch of people say to me, he called us, we really strongly disagree with this premise. We really think it's a lot better than he's saying it is. And the rationale for this largely seems to be Chuck Laudner, who is the man running Donald Trump's Iowa operation, who everyone who's worked with him in the past has basically described him to me as he's the guy who everyone leaves the campaign office at 10:30 at night, and they come back at 6 a.m., and he's still sitting there in the same clothes because he spent the entire night inputting all the data and kind of making sure that all of the numbers are right at hand. He's a data guy, he's a mechanics guy, he's an organization guy who doesn't like to talk to the press and really wants to stay out of it, but people who have worked with him in the past say if he says he can turn out these voters, we're inclined to believe he can turn out these voters. The other thing I hear anecdotally is that I had someone say they got a local party chair, county, district, some kind of local breakdown of GOP, said he got a call from someone, a woman who was like, look, I wanted to find out about caucusing. I'm not registered. I'm, basically housebound. How would I go about doing this? I really want to be able to caucus. And he said, oh, okay, let me give you the information, but can I ask, why is it that you're so dead set on doing this? This doesn't seem like something that would be particularly comfortable for you. And her response was she wants to vote for Donald Trump. And so there is a combination of both. It is partly about the mechanics and partly about the ground game. But one of the things people have seen with Trump this cycle is that he inspires a level of enthusiasm and dedication and, verging on kind of mania that a lot of other candidates don't. And so the people who support him, who are kind of have suddenly been, enlivened by the Trump candidacy, may really be trying to get out there without much help. They seem to really want to caucus for this guy. And so we'll see. Like you said, caucuses are a lot of organization. It's a lot of just like pulling bodies out of the house. It is, I can tell you, having stood outside for 2.5 hours last night, it is horribly cold here. It is not fun. There is certainly ice. There is maybe going to be snow, though it looks like we're probably going to miss that. And societally, the interesting thing to me being out here has been, if I didn't vote when I was growing up, my mother would have, it would have been terrible. It would have been like just the worst thing I could have done. Voting is a civic responsibility, and my parents believe it's a civic responsibility, and so I was going to go vote when I turned 18, and that was just the end of it. Out here, you talk to people, and they say, well, my son is a big Chris Christie supporter, but I don't know if he's going to caucus. He's 18, he's got a lot of stuff going on. Because like you said, caucuses are a process. You don't just go in, hand them your ballot, and walk out. You have to stay for at least an hour, probably 2 hours. You can stay forever if you really want to get into it, but it's a more extensive process. And I think people understand. People have lives. People have other stuff going on. It's a Monday night in January, or I guess February 1st. So Monday night in February, but very cold. A lot of stuff going on. Weekday. People got to be at work the next day. There seems to be less of a stigma to saying this is just inconvenient and I am not in the mood.
Now, if the Trump model is getting maniac, non-Republican, first-time caucus goers to show up on their own. I didn't
mean to call them maniacs. I just mean, it seems to inspire a fervor. Let's go with fervor.
Not zero ground game, but not probably the best ground game in Iowa. Cruz's strategy has been the traditional go to all 99 counties, don't just stick around the big media centers, get the big local endorsements. He has Congressman Steve King, who's a big anti-immigration crusader. He a conservative firebrand. He has one of the local talk show hosts, Steve Deese. He has the big one, the family leader evangelical bigwig Bob Vanderplaats, who endorsed Huckabee and Santorum the last two Iowa caucuses and is credited with helping them win those caucuses, has a big network of evangelicals that he can help activate. So even though Cruz's numbers might be flagging because he's getting a lot of negative ads from the Trump people, and again, also did not have a good debate last night, does that help him withstand those pressures? Because Iowa is, a Republican caucus is heavily dominated by evangelical voters.
Yeah, and we're going to see. The editor-in-chief of National Review, Rich Lowry, he got out here a couple days ago, and he wrote a post the other day that just said, here's what it feels like on the ground in Iowa. And the first bullet point was, nobody knows what's going on. Nobody knows if Trump is going to win, nobody, if Trump's ground game can actually pull it off, if Cruz is actually getting hurt by these ethanol attacks, if anyone's going to turn out, if anyone's going to turn out at all. And it was very funny, but it's very true. I mean, this has been a cycle where no one knows what to expect. We all of a sudden have this hype that Rubio is suddenly surging, and I had a couple of people say to me, Rubio could pull off a surprise second. He could really have done this perfectly, and we will all sit here and say, my gosh, his strategists are so genius. And he peaked 3 days before the caucuses. And if he does that, yeah, his strategists are totally brilliant. This is what they've been saying all along. We don't want him to peak too soon. We don't want him to peak too soon. You get your guy to peak 3 days before the Iowa caucuses, good. Well done. We will all tip our hats to you. But no one knows. And that's the hard part, is that this is a lot of moving parts, and Trump has just thrown this into a place where even the most experienced political operatives are sitting there and thinking, I don't know what happens. This is not what we're used to seeing.
Now, in 2012, the raw vote totals were Rick Santorum had 29,839 votes, slightly more than Mitt Romney's 29,805 votes. And that was after a quasi recount after the initial results. Right. And Ron Paul was third with 26,036 votes, and Gingrich was fourth with 16,000 votes and change. Now, no one is certain if the turnout levels will be the same as 2012. Right. But when you talk to the campaign operatives, are people talking a little trash? Are people saying, I got 15,000 ones in hand. I know who my voters are, and they're gonna show up. I know what we need. I know what we have. Are people talking in that level of specificity at this point?
They're definitely talking in that level of specificity. What I've basically been told is, if you see that turnout exceeds, I'm trying to remember, numbers are not really my strongest suit. If you see that turnout exceeds what it was in 2012, then there's a good shot that Trump has it. That probably means he managed to turn out those new voters that he's been talking about, and that he's moving in the right direction. If it far exceeds if there's a point at which he'll be really in the mix for first, and then there's a point at which if turnout is that much higher, it's likely that Trump actually turned out, I believe he's been saying 20,000 new voters. If he actually turns those out, it's over. That's a huge deal. But yeah, and people are getting down into every kind of scenario. People have been gaming this out with me on the phone for months. You call and they're like, well, Mitt Romney took this amount and Ron Paul took this amount, and so we think these votes will get divided up between XYZ. And people have been into the specifics of this for months. But they also, I am a reporter who doesn't write a lot of ground game stories because I think they're really hard to write in any kind of authoritative way, because you're never going to see the whole thing, and you really are taking someone's word for it. But that's what it's going to come down to, is whether these guys who are saying, these are my numbers, these are my mechanics, this is what we're going to make happen, are really true. If they're telling the truth, then we're going to see.
And it's such an amazingly small number of people that we're talking about. You would think if you're an old Iowa hand, you would literally know these people by name at this point.
I think a lot of people do. I think, this is a year where we've seen a lot more focus on students. That's been more on the Democratic side, that Bernie Sanders has been really making this push to get students to, students who are out of state right now, to make sure they come back to their local precinct and caucus. And, there was something on MSNBC of him saying, skip school, caucusing, this is civic duty. You don't need to be in school that day. I don't care if you have class. And so we'll see. But there are a lot of these sort of harder to gauge voting groups that people are looking at this year. It's hard to say whether they will behave as they traditionally have.
And one last ground game question. Cruz has the evangelicals, at least the leadership. Trump's trying to get out the new voters. Bush has a professional team that was put together very early on. Rubio's trying to pull off this peak late deal where he doesn't do a whole lot of work beforehand, and then it all comes together at the very end somehow. Christie, I have read, has a lot of people who are close to the Governor Branstad.
Yes.
I mean, how significant is that? I mean, is that? Branstad is literally the longest serving governor ever. He's been governor over 20 years. This guy knows his state inside out. I assume his people know his state inside out. Is that sufficient to pull out, more than what the polling might suggest?
We're gonna see. So, like you said, yes, Christie was the chairman of the RGA when Branstad was last running for re-election. He came in, he helped him a lot, he campaigned for him a lot, and there's clearly a level of loyalty there, at least among the staff. Branstad has obviously not endorsed. But yeah, a lot of Branstad's team is now Team Christie. They know what they're doing in this state. I mean, this can be said of a lot of campaigns. They're very good operatives out here. They've been doing this out here for a while. Yeah, Branstad's team is great. Christie's also been in the state, I want to say, well, the numbers may have shifted, but I think the last time I looked, it was the only people who had been in the state less than Christie and Jeb were Kasich and Jim Gilmore. So, these are not, and actually, for a period it was actually Trump, because Trump would fly in for one event and fly out. But, these are not people who are spending a ton of time on the ground here because they know it's not necessarily their strongest spot. But, again, one of the storylines coming out of Iowa will be who the surprise was. And Christie certainly would love to be that surprise. But he has said his main goal is, I have to beat Jeb. He says he's running in the governor's primary. He wants to be the best performing governor. And since Kasich isn't a factor out here, that means beating Jeb.
So that's the ground game. When you're in Iowa, what does the air war look like? I see ads, people share them on Twitter and Facebook. And so I see what is being produced. I can't tell the quantity, how they are being consumed, and how it looks like when you have a wall-to-wall stream of everyone's different ads, and how is it all just a giant blur and they all negate themselves, or is there go on?
Well, it's constant. I mean, I've had the news on in the past in the morning and looked up and sort of said, is that an ad? Is that still part of the news program? Like, it never stops, and you see them back to back to back. I saw my first week here, I want to say I saw a high preponderance of Bernie Sanders ads. But we sat there and watched the football game a couple weeks ago, and it was through the football game. You had the Rubio ad attack. There was a Rubio ad talking about immigration. There was a Cruz ad attacking Rubio. There was, it was just like all of a sudden you'd look up and you'd be like, is this the same ad? Is this a different ad? Are we still somehow doing ads? Like, it just doesn't stop. It's back to back to back to one ad after the other.
Do they all just discount each other, or does something break out? Does something really end up sticking because that one ad just has more pop than the other ones?
I can tell you anecdotally, I was at an event with Rubio in Oskaloosa earlier this week where a woman stood up and said, there is a PAC running an ad attacking you for your involvement in the Gang of Eight. Can you please clarify? Because when I try and explain this to people, I don't know how to explain it. And that's one of the Right to Rise ads. So yes, I think they are breaking through. I think people are seeing what the campaigns want them to see. And I think people who have kind of been passive viewers for a long time are suddenly paying attention a little bit more. So
now, I've read a couple things in the past week. I wrote a piece for Real Clear Politics about how the establishment should snap out of it and pull itself together, because even if Trump and Cruz are dominating right now, it's by no means a given that those camps are going to unite at the end of the day. And I did something similar. There's a Politico roundup of is Trump killing the GOP? That question was put to a handful of people, and I said, look, if the votes haven't been counted yet, so there's no reason to assume that Trump is engaging in a successful hostile takeover. And if the Trump people and the Cruz people are running scorched earth ads against each other, and the people can't, and one camp won't migrate to the other, then an established person could consolidate center-right support and still beat these guys. And so when I see a Trump ad attacking Cruz for being pro-amnesty, and I see a Cruz ad attacking Trump for being a crony capitalist, it makes me think, if I'm a Trump supporter and I really hate immigrants, and my guy is telling me that Cruz is a phony, then I'm not going to be so inclined to go over to him if he wins Iowa. And if Trump wins Iowa and the Cruz people are convinced that Trump is antithetical to constitutional conservatism, I'm not going to say, well, he's the closest to my guy, so I'll go with him. Are those ads having enough of an effect in Iowa where you're getting from the Cruz and Trump supporters, I hate that other guy. He is my least favorite, and there's no way I'm going to rally around that guy if my guy loses.
Maybe. There's definitely, you saw that Bloomberg was talking about throwing his hat in the ring if it's Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, or, we definitely are in a new election cycle where there seem to be options that are a lot of Republicans find just like flat out unpalatable. I don't know who the National Review editors vote for if Donald Trump becomes the nominee. I haven't talked to them about that, so I profess absolutely no knowledge. But what I will say is that, out here especially, you've seen kind of this big bear hug of Trump where Chuck, Branstad said this thing against Cruz, and the next day or the day after, Chuck Grassley, who's the senior senator who's been in office since 1980 and is sort of this like veteran esteemed, an old colleague of mine, Matt Fuller, called him the Mr. Rogers of the Senate, which is a fabulous description of him. He went to a Donald Trump rally and said, "Make America Great Again." And that was just stunning to a lot of reporters. And then Jeff Kaufman, who's the chairman of the Iowa GOP, introduced him at a rally in Muscatine on Sunday. And he came out and he said, look, new voters, we welcome you to the party. And if Donald Trump if you give us Donald Trump as the winner of the caucuses, I will 100%, I believe he said, I will 1,000% support him. That, if this is your guy, this is my guy. And so there has been sort of this, at the same time that there is a very public freak out on the right that Donald Trump could be the nominee, and that, there's a lot of kind of agonizing of what will we do? There is another part of the GOP that's sitting there and saying, if this is the guy, this is the guy, and we will get behind him. And you've seen this with a lot of elected officials when they don't like to answer the question, but you eventually get them down to, I will support the Republican nominee. So,
but
we'll see.
That's the establishment types expressing their deepest antipathy to Cruz.
Well, there's that too, but there's a fair bit of antipathy to Trump, obviously.
Sure.
I don't think that's limited to conservatives. I think that's a lot of the establishment.
Right. Fair enough. But when you hear from Branstad, say don't vote Cruz, and Chuck Grassley shows up at a Trump event, is that people saying Trump's the hot hand and he's bringing new voters to the party, so we want to get on the right side of that? Or is that people saying Cruz is anti-ethanol, ethanol is important to the Iowa economy, if there's anyone we can't have win the Iowa caucuses, we have to stop Cruz?
My sense has always been, this is not a pro-Trump, this is an anti-Cruz move. This is Trump looks like the best bet to defeat Cruz, and so we're going to make clear that he's the more palatable option. We're going to kind of quietly signal that, don't vote for Cruz. If you got to do it, vote for Trump.
And on the grassroots level, do you see Cruz v. Trump antipathy there? Are those camps deeply divided now, or is there still a sense like, I like both these guys. They both hate immigration. I just can't decide which one's my favorite. Or is the well poisoned? I
actually hear more people saying they're trying to decide between Cruz and Rubio, which I think might be the interesting upshot of all of this, is if all of the antipathy towards Cruz really does push people into Camp Rubio. I heard it the first time I looked at this woman and said, my gosh, I should take your number. I think you might be a unicorn. I'm never going to find someone again. But the more time I spend out here, the more people I talk to who are saying exactly that. We really like Cruz. We really like Rubio. We're not totally sure. There's been this intense effort kind of on the part of both campaigns, but also the media has often portrayed them as, two very different sides of the party. And I think out here there's a lot more, people perceive a lot more overlap than maybe, we've been all sitting here saying there is.
Well, this has been fantastic. I love being able. I mean, I'm stuck in Western Massachusetts. I could go to New Hampshire more often. I should, but I don't. I never get out to Iowa.
Next week.
That's right.
Next week's a really good time. You should come along.
I should find a way to get to free myself of my children and take a trip up there. But this is a real treat for me, and I hope for everybody listening to get this kind of on the ground assessment of Iowa. Is there anything else that's really important out there that you think people should know?
Not till February 1st. And then we'll all know the answers.
Well, so let me add one last question then. So it's Friday morning. What do you do in your job between now and Monday night, and what do you do Monday night?
I spend a lot of time on the phone. I will probably go to a fair number of events, and I suspect Monday night I will be out towards Cedar Rapids. I'm going to go to a caucus, and then Donald Trump, that's where he's doing his victory rally. Is that like a swing caucus precinct that you think is important to be at? I have mostly, this is based entirely on Cedar Rapids is far away from Des Moines. And so if I'm going out there for Trump, I'm sticking around. Okay. And so where can people track your reporting between now and Monday? It'll be on nationalreview.com or on my Twitter feed, which is Alexis_Levinson. Awesome. Alexis Levinson, National Review. And I got to say, obviously National Review is a conservative magazine, but the campaign reporting of the Republican race that it does, not just you, but your other colleagues, is really first rate. If you want to understand what's going on, it really is an excellent place to go. So I credit you for all your fantastic work so far. Well, thank you. So this has been the DMZ on bloggingheads.tv. You could check us out on the web, or it's also a downloadable in podcast form. Maybe we'll have a chance to talk to you next week in New Hampshire. We'll see if we can work that out. I hope so. Excellent. And we'll get Matt back soon. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Thanks so much.